right, the episode's titled I Know Who Killed Cleo Johnson. Do we find out who killed Cleo Johnson? Let's talk about it now. Hi everyone, it's David Stark from Watcher Pass, and it's Friday, which means it's Lady in the Lake Day. This is Lady in the Lake episode 6, I Know Who Killed Cleo Johnson. They finally have a shorter title. It's not like 3 sentences long. It'll maybe actually fit on the video. I'm ecstatic, and it's also a shorter episode, which I'm less ecstatic about. But is this episode worth your time? Do we find out who killed Cleo Johnson? My hot take is I think you should actually watch it later. I thought this was kind of a weaker episode. Now, look, it's beautiful and fantastical. It has a lot of like almost dream sequence-esque sequences, but I think it's ultimately a weaker episode than we have in the past. We do get some answers, but this also feels kind of like an episode that's more style than substance. Look, the dream sequences are great. They're really imaginative. They're beautiful. But for me, I wanted progression on this mystery. I wanted more answers, and we just don't get as much as I was hoping for. So I'm going to tell you a little about the episode, a few things I like, a few things I didn't like, and then really quickly go into a recap. It'll be pretty quick this time because it's a shorter episode. But if you don't know what happens to this episode, you want to watch it yourself, I would turn it off when you get to the recap section. Before that, though, I'll keep it vague. I'll keep it spoiler-free. I'll let you know when I get to those spoilers. So, remember, Lady in the Lake, Season 1, Episode 5 ended with Maddie getting stabbed by Miss Sawatsky, Stefan's mother. She went to talk to her about her son. They got into an argument. Miss Sawatsky seemed to get scared, stabbed Maddie in rage, and then because she was worried about what was going to happen next, she slit her own throat. So we ended that episode with Maddie bleeding in the house. She was able to call 911, but that's all we saw. Now in episode 6, we see Maddie in the hospital, and the whole episode is basically kind of like her recovery and the things that are going through her head as she is recovering from that stab wound, as she is trying to like get back into consciousness and the events that are happening around her during that time. So does she ever break out of that coma? And do we ever find out who killed Cleo Johnson? Well, you'll have to wait for the recap to find out. So things I loved about this episode. The first, look, there are some answers. We get some answers to some lingering questions, which is nice. Like, it's nice to get some of the things that have been out there in the ether. We seem to make some progress on those, which is good. There's only one episode left after this, so I'm hoping that a lot more answers come out a little bit later, but we do get some progress on this mystery. The second thing I loved, I like the beautiful scenes. Like, look, I'm lukewarm on the dream sequences. I think they're really cool. I think they're imaginative, and that they were very big and grandiose. And so, like, look, hats off to those sequences. They are interesting. They are kind of very trippy sometimes. They go through different styles very quickly. So they are definitely productions. I didn't love them overall in the episode framework, but I thought that they were beautiful on their own. And the last thing I loved, there's some really great music. They kind of accompany the dream sequences. You get some like, feels like old, like New Orleans kind of jazz. You get some gospel music. You get all sorts of interesting music during some of these sequences, and it is really beautiful. So all that being said, things I didn't love as much, I'll go with the dream sequences. They are beautiful, but I don't know, ultimately they felt a little bit too kind of mystical. For what has since been a relatively grounded series, Maddie always has had like a little bit of a sixth sense, I guess. Remember when she found Tessie, she kind of like intuited where to go. She's had some, visions or dreams of her past that have had like mystical kind of elements in them. And the dream sequences follow that, but this feels like the first episode where we've had like a majority of dream sequences. And it just felt like a little bit too off the rails from what has been a relatively grounded series overall. I felt almost like an episode of Twin Peaks versus what, has been kind of a historical mystery series. And look, I like Twin Peaks, but Twin Peaks leaned into the supernatural. That was the whole point. That town was supernatural. There was stuff about that place that was supernatural. The red room, the door. I mean, I haven't seen it in a long time. It's way out there. This has not had that. So this episode felt very off, very kind of like out of left field. So second thing I didn't love as much, it's kind of a shorter episode. It's only 45 minutes long. And in that, we probably only got like 15 minutes of real content because a lot of the stuff is like dreams and strange flashbacks and things like that, things that are related, but not like true, I don't know, detective mystery, character building, that kind of stuff. So it is a shorter episode. It feels like we don't get as much as I was hoping for in the episode before the finale. So all that being said, Lady in the Lake episode 6 comes to Apple TV Plus on August 16, 2024. Like I said, I was lukewarm on this episode. I think you should, my recommendation would be to watch it later. If you're already this far in, you're going to watch it anyways. And if you are going to get started in Lady in the Lake, go back, watch the first bunch of episodes, because I imagine episode 7 will be good. Although hopefully this isn't going to be a Changeling situation. Changeling, I loved that until we started to get towards the end. And then it went really, really downhill and turn very, very bad. I don't think that this will do that. I don't think that this series will end poorly, but I guess we'll find out next week. So that is Lady in the Lake episode 6. I'm going to go into a recap right now. So if you don't know what happens this episode, I would turn off now because there will be spoilers. So this episode starts with a kind of like flashback from Maddie's memory. It's in the past. Seems like I don't think it actually gives a day, a year, but it feels like it's probably like 12 or 13 years ago. Maddie's at some sort of event, and Alan Durst shows up. Her high school boyfriend, Alan Durst. His father, she had an affair with. He got her pregnant. She had to have an abortion. That we found that out, I think, in the last episode, maybe 2 episodes ago. Well, this is after those sequence of events. After the fact, Maddie is married at this point. She is Mrs. Schwartz. Alan comes back after, it seems like some sort of Navy tour. He's in like his, Navy white uniform. So he either, was deployed and came back. Maybe he's back from basic. I'm not sure where he's coming back from, but he comes back and sees her. They're at this event. He's very drunk, and him and her start talking. They go outside, and when he's out there, he apologizes for what his father did to her. And Maddie's kind of like surprised, like, when did you find out? And he said that he heard them talking a week before prom. And remember, prom, I think, is when Alan tried to force himself on her. I don't think he did. I don't think he did actually force himself on her. But they had like a very kind of like aggressive interaction at prom. So this was a week before prom. That's probably what prompted him to want to do this, because he kind of like recognized that she was sleeping with his father, and maybe that made him angry, or maybe that made him feel like not good enough. None of those are good reasons. Doesn't really matter what he felt like, but that was probably what the reason for why he then ended up trying to like force himself on Maddie. So he found out about a week before prom, and then also, I guess, but I don't think he knows the full extent, because Maddie kind of dismisses his apology, saying like, you don't know exactly what, you don't know everything that happened or something like that. So they keep talking. They go into another room. They argue for a little bit, like not like argue, but they, their voices raise a little bit. Alan at some point during the argument says, "You weren't my father's only girl." I think he was trying to hurt Maddie, and this, I guess, does seem to hurt Maddie. She starts to get a little bit upset, and then Alan goes up and apologizes to her, and then he kisses her randomly. And I was like, okay, this is all sorts of the wrong mood. This is all sorts of the wrong interaction. But then Maddie and him start kissing, and he closes the door. They hook up. They seem to, become intimate. Again, very, very strange situation. I don't know. Maddie probably isn't really happy with her married life, it seemed, I would guess. And so maybe Alan being there was an opportunity. I don't know. I don't know why. It appears that they end up having sex. And so then we get a hint that maybe this is what led to her little sociopath son, Seth, because after this sequence, we see Seth in the hospital where Maddie is. So it seems like that was the consummation of Seth, and that is why I said it's probably like 12 or 13 years ago. I don't know how old Seth is, but that's just my guess. So Seth is in Maddie's hospital room, and Alan shows up, older Alan in the current time, and he comes with flowers. He says he should apologize. He says that, because of her, they know the truth. And then there's this weird dream sequence, basically, where he is standing with Seth with his arm around him, kind of like a father-son, and he tells Maddie that your next child will know the truth. And then we see Maddie is pregnant. This is a dream sequence, obviously. We see Maddie is pregnant, and she gives birth. And the birth is a baby made of newspaper. And the nurse who gets the baby, said, Maddie asks, like, what is it? What is it? Because she wants to know if it's a boy or girl. And the nurse says, it's your story. It needs a good lead. And then we see that the nurse is Cleo Johnson, and she runs away. So Maddie follows her, and the building is flooded. It's kind of like that lake. And she's following a boxer, like Reggie, a boxer with a limp, clearly Reggie. And then we get into like another wild dream sequence. It's a weird one where it's almost like, if the Matrix fight was actually a choreographed dance. She's in a hall. She's in a big room with a ton of Cleos, a bunch of black women in like blue dress, the blue coats that Cleo wore, and they kind of like do a little dance. And then we see they're up on they're all over the room. And one of them, which is the Cleo, one of them who is Cleo, falls from like the second store, boom, hits the ground. And you're like, huh, that was weird. I wonder why that sequence was there. I can speculate. My guess, well, I'll tell you later. I'll tell you at the end why I think that sequence was there. So then we see the real world. We cut out of Maddie's dream sequence, and we see the real world. We see Reggie working out. dude looks cut. Like, good on him. He looks good. That's about all we see. We also hear there's news stories about the Zawadzki suicide and Maddie being in the hospital now. We find out a little later what happened with the Zawadzkis, but I'm gonna put it in here because it makes sense with what happens next in the series. So we find out that after the death of Miss Zawadsky, Stefan talked to the police and he confessed to what happened. It turns out that he tried to rape Tessie, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't rape her, and so he left her in the basement. And his mother found her later and ended up killing her and throwing her in the lake. And we know that it was the mother and not someone else because the blood under Tessie's fingernails matches Miss Zawadsky. So that seems to be the sequence. Maddie, I don't know if she believes it. Later, she asks, like, how can you know this or something like that? Or are we sure? So it seems like maybe she thinks something else is going on. But as far as we know, that is what happened. And now, because the police don't have Zawadsky as the suspect, because he, is confessing, and I guess they don't believe that he is the one that ended up killing Cleo, they go and find another suspect. They arrest Slappy. Slappy is the other person that they were suspecting. He was the last person to see her alive. They were having marital issues. I don't know if they know that she came into a bunch of money. I'm not sure, but that seems to be their reasoning. Now, after this, Slappy's son sees him getting arrested, and he goes and like starts walking around, just trying to like assume to clear his head. And Reggie pulls up to him and gives him a bag of money. It looks like it's Cleo's winnings from the number game. And then Reggie drives away before his son can ask questions. So we now see that Detective Platt is on the case. He's talking to Mr. Gordon, and he's asking about the Christmas numbers winnings. And during this talk, we again find out that Reggie is like a marine savant. Before, Mr. Gordon had mentioned to Maddie that Reggie was the one who did all the fish. Now, Mr. Gordon mentions to Mr. Platt, to Detective Platt, that like Reggie is a marine savant. Like if you ask him any sort of fish, he'll be able to name all sorts of statistics about it. Mr. Gordon tells me to tell him about some sort of fish. I forget what it was, but it was some sort of fish, and it was related to what they were talking about. And he rattled off a bunch of stats about it. And after Platt leaves, Mr. Gordon gets mad at Reggie and says that's two people who've come asking about the money. And Reggie basically says like he's sorry, he messed up. He took care of it like Mr. Gordon said, but he messed up. So Bob, Maddie's boss from the Star, comes by and gives an update on the case. That's where we learn about what happened with the Zawadzkis. But I wanted to put it earlier. It makes more sense for why Slappy was arrested. And he's telling her about this, and then he tries to start get information about the case, like asking her what happened at the Zawadzkis. He wants to get like a quote for a story. And Maddie is basically like, this is my story. Like, you're not getting it. She's weak in the hospital, but she's still defending her story. And after this, after she argues a little bit with him, they force him to leave. Now, we're back in Maddie's mind in the dream sequences. Maddie wakes up in a morgue. We see Tessie there. Eventually, Tessie is upset that Maddie's not telling her story anymore. And Maddie's like, what? Your story's done. Like, you had a nice life. You were killed. It was tragic, but your story's done. Eventually, it seems like there's two parts of Maddie, though, because she's very cold to Tessie at the start. And then after Tessie gets upset, Maddie turns around and says, like, I'm sorry. Like, I will tell your story, but right now I have to focus on this other one. So it seems like Maddie has like, I don't know, not two personalities, but there are multiple facets to Maddie's personality. And one of them is the cold, like, your story's not interesting anymore. I need to move on. And the other is like, I'm sorry, I can't focus on that now. I will make it right later. So we will see if that's the case. We don't know. But Maddie is in this like morgue area. Eventually, she pulls out her son's body, who's like clearly a mannequin. It looks really silly. It kind of makes sense a little bit later. And then after she pulled out some more bodies, she walks into I think like a church or some sort of hall where there's a bunch of like mannequins in there. That's probably why Seth was a mannequin, and some broken mannequin parts. And then Maddie and Platt do this like really beautiful dance. It's beautiful and very weird. And then the transitions into like the funeral of Maddie, where she gives her own eulogy, and how she like tried to like live her own life. So that happened. And then we go back to the real world. We see a story about the Ku Klux Klan kind of ramping up protests and things like that. It's happening in this area. Platt drives to the police station in the middle of a Ku Klux Klan protest. So it provides a backdrop for some of the other things that are happening now. We find out that Platt is being forced to resign because it was found out that him and Maddie were hooking up. And I guess it's illegal. It's against the law. These are probably Jim Crow laws, even in Baltimore. I guess they exist there. And so the police officer's like, rather than have you and Miss Schwartz, or rather than have you and Miss Morgenstein be arrested and go to jail, the captain is just going to like allow you to resign and kind of like sweep this under the rug. So it seems like Platt is being forced to resign because of his relationship with Maddie. This isn't going to like make it go away though. I mean, it doesn't mean that they can be together. They're not in a relationship. It's not bad because he's a police officer and, she's a potential suspect or something like that. It's just because of their race. And so even though he's resigning, that doesn't fix their problem. I guess we'll see what happens in the next episode. So after this, Platt goes to Maddie and is in the hospital with her. It's pretty sweet. She wakes up a little bit. He tells her about how he likes that she's driven and how he wants to be together with her and how he wants to seems like he wants to publicly be together with her before. He talks about how he's had relationships with other white women before, and the best thing was that they would all want to keep it secret because they had to because it was legal, but he seems to want to be more public with this one. So it's sweet. He's there in her he's there in her hospital in public. He's acknowledging her, which is nice. So then we go back into Maddie's head, and it's like a carnival-ish thing. It feels like there's like a carnival going on. There was like a whites only carnival that she ignores, and she goes into, I guess, the black carnival part, which ends up at the fountain, the fountain where Cleo was found, and it is this beautiful, well lit, like the fountain is lit up. There's a bunch of people around. They're humming like Amazing Grace. It's kind of like a gospel setting. And then Cleo in this fabulous outfit is on a ring in the sky, and she swings from the ring, and eventually she falls from that ring. Maddie jumps into the lake, pulls her up, pulls her out of the lake, and then when she's out there, she says who killed you? I need to know who killed you. And that is when Reggie emerges from the lake with a paddle and thwacks Maddie. And when this happens in her dream, Maddie in real life, her head hits the side. So I don't know. I guess she's having a bad dream, I think. Now, after this, after her head gets hit to the side, she wakes up and she's in the room, and an orderly comes into her room, and a recognizable voice that we hear a voice that we recognize. The orderly says, "What have you done now, Miss Morgenstein? You're not dreaming. You're right here, right now with me." And Maddie asks, "Who are you?" And the orderly, looks at her and says, "I was Cleo Johnson." And boom, that is the episode. That is the end of I Know Who Killed Cleo Johnson. A little bit misleading because we don't actually find out who killed Cleo Johnson, but we find out, I guess, that Cleo Johnson's not dead. So no one killed Cleo Johnson. Now, what do we think this means? Well, someone commented on the last episode. I think that they're probably correct that we never found out who the lady was. We saw the blue coat, it was underwater. We never saw the actual body. So their theory was that Dora OD'd that night. And so they used the coat to fake like Cleo had died, throw her in that fountain so that I guess she would probably decompose enough that they wouldn't be able to actually identify her. And that would allow Cleo to then duck out with the earnings and get out of and leave this whole situation. Reggie would look like he took care of it. Dora was dead, but she was going to go to Paris anyway, so no one would question why she disappeared. Reggie would have to keep that secret, and maybe he could have kept it quiet, except he broke his leg there, and so he probably had to at least say something to Mr. Gordon. So that I think is a pretty valid, valid idea. The coat is so recognizable that if they found someone in that coat and they were a little bit decomposed, they probably wouldn't have dug in too much about it. And that also explains why there was that sequence with all the different Cleos in the various coats, because it kind of becomes like a shell game where they're all going around Maddie, and you can't really tell which is which. All you see are the coats. The coats are where's the most recognizable part about them. So I think that might be why they had that sequence. It also might explain why Reggie was giving money to Cleo's son. It could be that he felt bad for killing his mother. That would be a logical explanation. Or it could be that one of the things that Cleo wanted was to give money to her son so that so that he could survive, and she made Reggie do that for her while she was in hiding or while she was doing whatever it was she was doing. So it seems like that's probably what happened. I don't know why she would stick around Baltimore though. If she wanted to disappear, she feels like she should probably have gotten out and then gotten her son out. But maybe she's there. I don't know. Maybe she's working with the cops. Maybe she's trying to bring down Mr. Gordon. Who knows? Maybe she's working with Mrs. Summers to try to get her elevated to this position and then be able to make some real change. I'm not sure, but we know that apparently that Cleo Johnson's alive. It feels like that was not in Maddie's head. So it feels like Cleo Johnson's alive. It feels like someone else was in the lake, probably Dora OD'd. And so no one killed Cleo. Drugs probably killed Dora. And the testy explanation seems right, although it feels weird that Stefan would never have brought that up to Maddie. It probably makes sense if you did that. If you were like a child rapist, you probably wouldn't want to tell anyone that, especially a reporter who is writing a story about you. But it does feel a little off. I still think that Seth might be part of it. Seth knows that he is not his dad's son. Seth might know who his father is, might know that it's Alan Durst. Maybe he got angry about that. Maybe he wanted to hurt his dad who wasn't there in a similar way that he felt hurt. So he killed his half sister. That feels like a stretch, but I don't know. Seth has been real weird this entire season. So maybe he is just a teenager and having teenage angst, but I don't know. Feels like he's probably involved in some way. But I guess we'll find out next week. Oh, and then, you know, I guess we'll also see if Maddie ends up writing her story. They seem to keep saying that she has to write her story. She has to like tell the story. And the whole premise of this sequence of this series is that Cleo is telling Maddie about their life. So maybe in episode 7, Cleo will actually sit down with Maddie and tell some more about that and tell some more about what is happening. Maddie will be able to write a big story about, maybe some of the underground, maybe Gordon and his like organization. That's all things that Cleo could know. Cleo probably knows about some of the other seedier aspects of his organization. So maybe that is what Maddie is going to be talking about. Maybe that is what Maddie is going to be writing in episode 7, which will also then allow her to cement her legacy as a writer, which is something that she has been pursuing. So maybe they'll all come together and tie up in a nice little bow. I guess we'll see. I guess we'll find out in episode 7 next week. But right now, that was Lady in the Lake episode 6. It comes to Apple TV Plus on August 16th, 2024. If you do check it out, let me know what you think. Let me know what you like and didn't like. I'd love to hear it. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.